Hello, this is Greg from Mystery Honey. I thought I'd share a comment that I got on YouTube today. It says, I'd be interested to get your opinion on Varroa treatment. Are we doing more harm than good? I think the current research is suggesting that one of the main reasons for such a large amount of honeybees dying in the US could be due to treatment resistance in Varroa. I can see parallels with how overuse of antibiotics resulted in swine flu, etc. This is an amazing comment. It touches on something that is being discussed all over the world in many different fields, not just to do with Varroa. And unfortunately, there is no clear answer. It's extremely nuanced. So everything I'm saying here is pretty much going to be based on the UK, because I know a bit about the US and what they've been dealing with, but I know more about the UK and what we're dealing with. So for us in the UK, we've been dealing with Varroa since the 80s. That's when it first came over to our shores and just took over the country. We had a massive die-out of native bees, loads of colony losses all over the country until we started to find ways of combating the Varroa. That was mostly done with miticides at the time. Some of these were quite toxic to humans as well, so there was a lot of issues with that. We still use some of these miticides now, so amitraz is one of the main ones. Even as early as the 90s, we started to realise that Varroa mites were starting to get a resistance to amitraz. The way it works is that the majority of the mites in a hive die out because of this miticide. Hooray! But like one or two, or maybe three or four, they're resistant to it, or just resistant to it. Maybe it just sort of wounds them and they're limping along, but they reproduce and fill that hive up full of Varroa mite again. Now what's happened is that they've started to use that miticide again because they found out it worked, and it worked really well, like 99% drop, so they used it again. And what happened was that instead of like three or four, or like one or two mites surviving and they were like wounded, you got like three or four mites surviving and they were fine, and maybe like 10 mites that were like wounded, and then they reproduced, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So that's pretty much what happened, and that's how we know that Varroa mites became resistant to this miticide. So then we started looking into different types of treatments that we could do, and it's taken a long time and a lot of research. It is a massive study all over the world because Varroa mites have just exploded everywhere pretty much. Even Australia, one of the last bastions, has been taken over last year before, thanks to the Varroa. And this is why a lot of us beekeepers are saying that importing bees is really bad for the country. You can get exotic pests like the Varroa mite coming over. So with this research, we found a few alternatives to this miticide. We found some other miticides that work as well, and we've also found that formic acid in high enough doses will possibly hurt the bees, but it'll definitely kill the mites. We've also found that oxalic acid, when vaporized or dribbled, also kills a lot of mites as well. And there's a few other methods too, but I'm not going to get into them. So what America is finding now is that the bees are becoming more and more resistant to the miticides. America's bee populations, honeybee populations, are vast. They are humongous because there's so many bee farmers, and bee farmers in the UK maybe have like 100 hives. Like I have under 100 hives and I'm counted as a bee farmer. In America, 100 hives as a hobbyist, they have something ridiculous, like I think 1,000 hives is like a bee farmer. That's more than the majority of our bee farmers in the UK, but that's like the norm in America. So when they treat with miticides, they are putting a lot of miticides in their hives, and there's a lot of bees there, which granted maybe like 2 or 3, 4 or 5 mites are limping along, but in 1,000 hives in such a concentrated area, those mites are just going to explode, and it's going to be a lot of miticide resistant Varroa that are left. So what can we do? Because this is going to affect everyone else in the world eventually. Like America's seeing it now, but it is quite enclosed, whereas the rest of Europe, Asia, etc., they're going to have to be dealing with this eventually. The next stage is to breed Varroa resistant bees, and this is going to be the hardest part because this is pretty much herd immunity, and whenever it comes to herd immunity, it means a lot of death. And bee farmers are already on a shoestring budget. I think I made a video about this the other day. Just being a small time bee farmer, I'm on an extremely shoestring budget. If I lose too much money, my business may as well just collapse because there's no way I can bring it back. So for bee farmers to lose stacks of bees just to increase the chance of Varroa resistance is really hard to do. It's going to be heartbreaking, and it's possibly going to take some farmers out if that's the case. That's why funding is extremely important when it comes to this, and I'm hoping that APHA, the NBU, will get more grants to be able to fund this. I think they've already got some grants on the go, and I think they've already got a lot of research into this, but a lot of hobbyists are doing this work for them. So to go back to the question, are we doing more harm than good? Ish. I think we'll always need to do some sort of mite treatment, but I think we need to be smart about it. I think we need to do mite checks rather than just treating them willy-nilly as just a stable, oh, it's this time of the year, I need to treat them. It's this time of the year, I need to treat them. I think we need to all take the time to do mite checks, to count how many mites we have in the hive, to see if the mite drop is high, and then decide whether to use a treatment or not. We also need to get more funding into Varroa resistant bees. So there's businesses out there at the moment who have never treated for Varroa. I think that, sure, these guys have probably faced a lot of Varroa death, but I think that they're going to come into their own later on when mites in the UK start to become really resistant to a lot of our miticides. So yeah, I think that's as best of an answer I can possibly give. I will personally be sticking to formic acid and oxalic acid because I think that these will always be effective. But I'll definitely be looking into creating Varroa resistant bees in the near future because I think that is definitely going to be the future. Anyway, I hope that cleared things up a bit or muddied the water. I am known to waffle.